Let's continue with the First Seminole War. I left off in January 1818, and the last time I did this. So I want to start with February 1818. Stuck at home this weekend, so I want to continue where I left off, did some presentations. In February 1818, February 8th, Lieutenant Colonel Trimble writes to Secretary of War John C. Calhoun from New Orleans, says, I've received information that Colonel Woodbine, who built the Nichols Ford and supplied for Prospect Bluff Negro Fort on the Apalachicola River, it says that Colonel Woodbine entered the Apalachicola River on the 14th with 2 schooners, 50 white men, 500 Negroes, and a large Indian force, and has taken a position at or near Negro Fort, probably with the intention of intercepting supplies from this place, New Orleans, to Fort Scott in Georgia, blockading the Apalachicola is what he's indicating. The information was brought by a friendly Indian and has been substantiated by a Negro boy who says he deserted from Woodbine. These vessels were probably loaded with artillery and munitions of war. In other words, what Woodbine did 2 years earlier, and when they built Negro Fort, but it turns out that this is all hearsay. It's not true. The fort is not rebuilt, although that's what Jackson and the Secretary of War are led to believe. So at this point, Prospect Bluff, it still remained destroyed from a year and a half earlier. February 10th, 1818, at Fort Hawkins, General Andrew Jackson to Secretary of War John C. Calhoun. Jackson says, I've reached Fort Hawkins and learned that the Georgia militia under General Glasscock has returned home. The militia was called out, but nothing happened and they went home. Fort Scott is out of provisions and the frontier is very exposed. General Gaines has ordered supplies from New Orleans for the campaign. The contractor is having failed. Gaines is ordered from the quartermaster. I am without any official advice for the requisition of the state of Georgia, asking for more troops, militia, and many of them have refused to march. When every week furnishes a statement of murder, what kind of feeling must pervade the state of Georgia? I trust the Tennessee volunteers will be up in a few days when I shall be able to act with promptness and effect. So he's basically calling the Georgians cowards, but the Georgians want to stay and protect their home. They don't want to go down to Fort Scott and Spanish Florida and fight with the Indians down here. So anyway, Jackson's having his problems, and Calhoun requests accounting from Jackson. So on February 14th, 1818, Andrew Jackson to John C. Calhoun from Hartford, Georgia, arrived and met with General Gaines, planning a coordinating move with the Georgia militia and General Gaines for the relief of Fort Scott. Exposed as a copy of a letter to Captain Callis, contractor at Fort Hawkins, showing the expense and what has been provided. His views are purely mercenary, and it may defeat the best devised plans of the commander-in-chief. And one thing about Jackson, during all his early military career, he always ran afoul with getting supplies and food. Same thing in the Creek War in 1813, 1814. So he's no friend of contractors and suppliers, which he believes they take the money and run. Jackson says alternate plans have been made to deliver supplies to Fort Scott. And so Jackson suggests the directions of a court martial for the suppliers who didn't come through. Various acquisitions against General Mitchell, the Creek agent, the agent of the Creek Nation, using his influence from preventing the Creek Nation from joining General Gaines. Of course, Mitchell told Gaines that he's not going to authorize the Creeks, that he's in charge, not General Gaines. And of course, Jackson says that David Mitchell was engaged with smuggling a large number of African Negroes that he has purchased from Amelia Island. Upwards of 100 have been carried to the agency, part of which have been seized by the officer of customs. Upward of 100 African Negroes passed by Barnett's on the Flint River bound for the agency. The Creek Indians have complained that the general has retained, or they're talking about Mitchell, has retained $85,000 in funds appropriated from Congress due to the Indians for money payment of depredations committed by the Red Sticks, or in other words, attacks by the Seminoles. The Creeks further state that Mitchell has paid off the Indians for military service and goods instead of cash. Mitchell established a store or tavern within the nation, and he's taken in possession all the ferries in which tolls are extracted. Colonel Brearley has given a copy of the passport issued by Mitchell and has seen several Africans in possession of Mitchell mentioned above the night of the arrival of Captain McIntosh, the customs officer, but were not ascertained. One thing about Mitchell is he resigned from governor in Georgia to become Indian agent after Colonel Hawkins had died. And Mitchell probably is not doing this out of his benevolence towards the Indians to help that out. If he resigns from governor to become Indian agent, apparently he decided this is a sweet deal that he's going to profit a lot. So he's involved in slave smuggling, cattle rustling, cattle selling, a lot of illegal activity, and he'll eventually be removed by President Monroe after a congressional investigation. But this was all uncovered by General Gaines and General Jackson. So they actually did something good for the Indians and stopped the slave smuggling, and Mitchell's ripping off everybody and pocketing a fortune. Of course, David Mitchell writes to John C. Calhoun, audit of the expenses and drafts since March 1817. He explains that the reason for the presents going to McIntosh was because he is the chief of great importance. Mitchell's talking about Chief William McIntosh. Every mechanical tool has been sold under Agent Benjamin Hawkins under the improper assumption that it was private property. He has been pressed to furnish the Indians with spinning wheels, plows, and other tools. At Fort Hawkins, he found a number of hoes and works tools delivered under the contract by Mr. Early of Carolina that are unfit for use. He has had them repaired and distributed for use among the Indians who are in much want of articles. Mitchell says, I'm forwarding you an abstract of presents presented to the Indians during the late war for the Indians and the losses sustained. On the 19th, an outrage was committed on the road from this place to Fort Mitchell by a party of hostile Indians. The particulars are from my son on his way to Fort Mitchell. On his way to Colonel Beardsley and meeting the friendly warriors about half a mile from the 18-mile creek, he saw a most distressing sight. A party of old travelers of two men, Mosley and Harris, with Mosley's wife and child, an infant not 5 months old, had been attacked by hostile Indians at 10 o'clock the night of the 19th. I arrived and found Mr. Harris scalped, Mrs. Mosley shot through both thighs, the right arm and hip, and very serious blow from a tomahawk to the head. The infant was tomahawked. It is thought, however, that they will recover. This is the first instance of any parties venturing this high up. It is hoped that when the troops are soon concentrated at Fort Scott, that they'll prevent such outrages. Circumstances, however, that alarm is such that traveling is suspended and will continue when the enemy is, until the enemy is out of our country. And Mitchell sends expenses from his records. Andrew Jackson writes to Secretary of War John C. Calhoun from Fort Early. In my last from Hartford, Georgia, I expressed hope that the plans adopted to procure supplies from Georgia to transport them to Fort Scott would relieve me from any embarrassment on that account until a decisive blow could be struck upon the enemy. A Georgia detachment marched that night. General Gaines received a letter from Colonel Arbuckle at Fort Scott of his intentions to abandon that post in event of not receiving supplies. General Jackson ordered a large supply of provisions to the Creek Agency to be transported in boats to Fort Scott, ordered from Mobile by himself, but Jackson says he was deceived. There has not been problems with building boats. The excessive rains have rendered the roads so bad that the wagons have been abandoned and men have marched without the barrels of flour. They'll arrive at Fort Scott tomorrow, seek to procure corn from the Indians, which they'll find that the Indians won't have any because they took it all the previous month. The failure of the superintendent will be investigated. The waters are unusually high and the ground so rotten that there's much difficulty even with a pack horse that cannot pass. Every stream we are compelled to bridge or swim. This is more effect of the what they call the year without summer. A few years earlier, a couple years earlier, was it 1815 when the volcano exploded in Indonesia? It put such dust in the atmosphere that for years the temperature would be cooled on the earth. It would result in the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo, causing unusual snow during the summertime. It'll cause starvation the world over, and a very cold summer. Millions of people will die of starvation because of crop failure. And that's the end of February. And we'll continue in the next program of March 1818.